Sending out the plan to the mech pilots, Shiro organized it with Sheena, Glenn, Akess and Oren taking the lead with everyone else covering their backs. Sheena, Akess, and Oren should have the power to take on most tier SIXs that stand in their way, while Glenn has first-hand experience with fighting one. None of the core party members would participate since there wasn't much need to, and they'll only show themselves when it's time to link up as the lifeline. That, and also if things go south. That way, they don't have to show more than they need to in case anyone was watching. While she was organizing this raid in the middle of the night, Shiro had Nantion keep an eye on the Argus network to make sure that all of the satellites were in position and ready to be used. With how big this world was now, it was not surprising that the satellites were taking a while to cover the entire world. However, while waiting for the satellites to be ready, Shiro had to admit that looking at the satellite footage of the world right now was quite shocking. Many cities were now destroyed with frozen tundras and burning mountains appearing more often. Large creatures could be seen flying around, many being dragons, and some even swimming in the sea. She spotted some of the old cities that she had visited before, and their locations had been completely shifted when the New Age started. New land masses brute forced their way between cities, splitting the earth and tearing apart the validity of all maps created previously. In addition to this, they could see giant swarms of monsters traveling in a pack. From the satellite footage, it looked like a black mass moving until further inspection, revealing them to be giant wolves that destroyed anything they came across. Despite only being averaged around level 300, Shiro watched as they completely devoured a level 500 in a few moments due to their numbers and ferocity and not backing off no matter how many died. What's scary was after consuming the monster, the wolves started to split. Those that ate the most had a higher chance of splitting in two, creating another wolf that joined the pack. Once they had finished splitting, the group would continue, looking for the next prey. All of the casualties that they suffered in the initial hunt against the level 500 had been replenished, and they actually had more wolves than they began with. If this is left unchecked, they could become a serious problem. Thinking about it for a moment, Shiro had some of the satellites monitor the movement of the wolves to make sure they don't get out of hand while splitting. If they do, she'll forcefully cut down their numbers. Seems like the mech pilots are ready for the raid on the zone, Nantion said as he sent a holographic screen towards Shiro. "MN all right. I'll go command them through the holograms." Shiro nodded. For this raid, they had mechs with different weapons such as rail cannons, snipers, assault rifles, and shotguns. They're split into groups where it'll balance out the composition. In terms of melee combat, all of them had swords, but only Glenn's mech was hard focused on the melee combat. ####. Materializing a hologram in the mech hangar, she could see the specialized pilots giving the standard pilots a short speech about their strategies. Seeing her hologram, all of them saluted towards her. "MN, seems like everyone's ready." Shiro smiled as Sheena nodded her head. "Good. I'll be splitting my holograms in each of your mechs and command you from the back line. I'm sure that with the specialized units, there's no need for the tier SIXs to step into the battle." Shiro chuckled. "We won't disappoint you." Akess promised as Shiro chuckled. "I hope not. But enough with the chit-chat. Everyone suit up and prepare for deployment. I want this zone captured in 30 minutes or less. If it takes too long, it'll draw too much attention to us." Shiro ordered as each of the pilots gave her one final salute before running towards their mechs. Dismissing her current avatar, Shiro split her attention to all of the mechs joining this assault. Tiny versions of her appeared in the cockpit as she activated all of the launch protocols of the mechs, readying them for deployment. Requesting confirmation of deployment from all mech pilots, Shiro said as she tapped the table. Suddenly, nanobots surged in the hangar, creating an archway that housed a portal. Receiving confirmation from everyone, Shiro nodded her head. Detaching the mech from their repair stations, she watched as Sheena took the lead and stepped through the portal. ####. Just as we stepped through the portal, we were surrounded by totems that camouflage our arrival. Our mana signals, and even the bright portal behind us would be hidden in plain sight. Looking at the hologram of Her Highness sitting down with her legs crossed, I couldn't help but feel pressured to perform to the best of my abilities. "Sheena, you and Glenn will take the lead with your own squad. I'll command the others to back you up. Maria is also in your squad, so you don't have to worry too much when it comes to support." Hearing this, I nodded and gestured towards Glenn. Activating our camouflages, I took the lead in this assault. "How much damage is allowed?" I asked since I wasn't sure if we wanted to keep the castle intact or not. "As much as you want. However, Do remember that there are innocents that we might be able to recruit. Don't traumatize them too much since it'll be harder to get them on our side if we do. Understood. Requesting permission for condensing the mech unit for more controlled attacks. Permission granted. Hearing this, I reached up and flicked a few switches before sticking my hands into the two handles that appeared in front of me, jumping up in the air to make this process a little easier. I watched as the mech armor shrink down and wrap around my body like a suit rather than a giant robot that I commanded. It wasn't skin-tight since it was still 3 times my size, but it was much smaller than before. Through the lenses of the helmet, the controls were now only visible to me, much like the system. Swiping my hand, I activated the scan function the moment I saw the castle in the distance. Letting out a pulse of energy, the castle walls became transparent, and all of the people inside now had an orange glow around them. I have marked down the priority targets for you. Once the barrier drops, take them out with the sniper. Her Highness said as a countdown appeared in front of me. Understanding that this was how long it was until the barrier drops, I summoned the sniper. Maria, give me a buff. Sniper unit, I have transferred the location of the priority targets to you. Take them out in 10 seconds. I called out. Laying down on the hill opposite the castle, I aimed towards the location of the Tier 6. Mana surged from the suit towards the weapon. While it was not my own mana, it was strangely adaptive. If my mana transformed into a cold spell, the mana from the suit would copy and become almost indistinguishable from my own mana. Even though my level was not high, I could still take out powerful beings thanks to this suit. Locking down on the target, magic circles appeared along the barrel. Watching the countdown, my finger hovered over the trigger. Once the countdown reached 1, I watched as countless motes of light appeared in the sky along with a trail of bullets that I recognized from the artillery. Trusting in the timing, I pulled the trigger. Asterisk, bang. The recoil of the gun sent me stumbling back a little, but I managed to stabilize myself in time to watch the destruction happen. Several pillars of light descended from the stars above, creating cracks in the barrier as the artillery dealt the final blow and shattered the barrier just as the bullets closed in. Pushing past the barrier without being hindered, I watched as several high-priority targets were shredded to pieces thanks to the bullets. The moment the bullet entered their body, it exploded into countless spears and wedged them in the center of their room. Even if they barely managed to survive, they weren't far off being killed. As for the Tier 6 that I aimed for, the bullet was extra special. He managed to erect a barrier, but it was no use. Upon coming into contact with the barrier, it drained all of the mana used and empowered itself. I watched as it embedded itself deep into his throat, releasing a swarm of nanobots inside him. If he used mana, he would only cause more to spawn. The only way for him to get rid of them would be to forcefully rip them out, but at this point, it was too late. Targets are down, I said as Her Highness nodded her head. Breach and secure. I'll be sending a Tier 6 over to become the new lifeline. Glancing up, I could see the crest fade away, signifying the lifeline being killed. Asterisk, bang. Crashing through the castle gates, Glenn summoned 2 swords and cleaved towards the guards that blocked their path, shoving them aside. Securing the castle itself wasn't too hard since most of the priority targets have been killed by the snipers. All that's left is to take care of the ones that were fleeing the scene. While he was leading a group of mechs to deal with them, a portal opened in front of the castle. Stepping through, Lysandra glanced up at the castle. Seeing the burn marks with clean holes in the walls, she couldn't help but pity the high-priority targets. They died without even being able to put up a fight. If it was her, she would have wanted at least to land a hit before dying. Shaking her head, she was about to enter when a flower pattern started to emerge above their current location. Feeling the mana gather towards the center, she widened her eyes. Mom, there's a slight change in the situation, Lysandra said as she activated her earpiece. I know, I'm looking at it right now. From the runes, it seems like it's a large-scale throne world. Whoever set this up is planning to grab everyone here and drag them somewhere. Shiro replied as she narrowed her eyes. Biting her lip, she remembered what Nantion had told her earlier, how she should trust in their capabilities more and not put everything on her own shoulders. Grabbing Nantion's sleeve, she tightened her grip. Lysandra, I trust that you can deal with it. There's not much that is known about this queen, so you'll need to be careful. I've already sent a notice to Keiko, and she's on the way there for support. With the 2 of you, killing a Tier 6 queen should be easy, Shiro said as Lysandra couldn't help but pause for a moment. She knew that Shiro worried a lot when it comes to their safety, and if possible, she would take care of all the unknown variables before sending them to do anything. The fact that she is voluntarily sending her to fight the queen means that she has put a lot of trust in her capabilities. Feeling warm inside, Lysandra couldn't suppress her smile. "Amen, I'll be careful." Ending the call, Lysandra could feel energy course through her body as this was a task given to her, which meant that her power was boosted. Unfurling her wings behind her, she could see that golden patterns with runes within them started to spread themselves out, while the corruption seemed to be pushed back. Previously, her wings were half white, half black, but now it was leaning towards the light side. "Attention, all mech pilots. This is Lysandra, and I'll be taking over command for this operation for now. We're going to be engaging against the queen soon. All melee units, prepare yourself. Long-ranged casters, I want you to be at the castle in the next 30 seconds, or else you'll be left out." Lysandra commanded as she flew into the sky. Hovering above the castle, she summoned 2 long swords and combined them into a great sword. Stabbing down, a pulse of energy spread out as all of the pilots received a buff thanks to one of her skills. For the next hour, they'll experience a 200% boost to all stats. Unfortunately, this was a skill that only worked with those lower than Tier 5. Ray of Hope. As the Divine Judgment Archangel, you will become a ray of hope for the soldiers on the battlefield. Once per day, you can activate this skill, and those below Tier 5 will receive the following benefits: 200% boost to all stats, 100% light elemental damage to all attacks, 80% fire elemental damage to all attacks, 50% chance for any attack to double up and strike again. This skill will affect anyone you deem as an ally. Can buff up to 10,000 allies. With this skill activated, everyone within the mechs felt invigorated as the mechs reacted to this change and started to adapt. Each of the standard mechs was now decorated with white armor that had golden markings, making them look like paladins under Lysandra's command. It didn't take long for the casters to arrive, especially after receiving her buff. While it may not improve the power of their mech tremendously, it meant that the pilots could withstand more backlash from the controls, allowing them to improve their effectiveness with the mechs. Once the casters arrived, the flower pattern in the sky was now closing in on them. Suddenly, even the artillery units in the distance were teleported in. Raising an eyebrow, Lysandra realized that everyone who participated was now trapped beneath the flower. Dome formation, artillery in the center, casters in behind the tanks. Sheena commanded as everyone got into position immediately. Seeing their response time, Lysandra nodded in satisfaction. Set all skills on ready to fire. Depending on the situation, be ready to attack on my command. Lysandra ordered as the artillery bunkered down. Spikes shot out from their backs, locked them to their spot as giant rail cannons appeared on their shoulders. With the tank units holding giant shields that protected them from all sides, they looked like a hedgehog that had railguns instead of quills. Watching their surroundings distort, lights started to fade as they were in total darkness. They couldn't even see the people next to them even though they were side by side. "Do not panic," Lysandra called out as she had been trained for a situation like this by Shiro. "If your sight has been robbed, empower the other senses. Map out the area using mana." Like a radar, mana pulsed out from Lysandra as she realized they had been surrounded on all sides. Several Tier 6 spells were aimed towards them as she spotted a few Tier 6 beings along with what seems to be a woman. Her features were blurred since Lysandra hadn't mastered this technique yet, but there was no reason to remember someone who was about to die. Before the queen could say anything, Lysandra raised her blade and swiped horizontally. Swords made from light formed around her and shot out. Asterisk bang. Crashing into some of the spells and halting them temporarily, Lysandra took a deep breath. Unload everything you have. Tanks, raise your defense and don't let anything pass. Upon hearing her command, mana flared from each of the mechs as illusionary castle walls appeared around them due to the innate skills of the shields. Railguns fired, splitting into several beams and tearing apart anything it touched. As for Glenn, he charged forth with his mech. Thanks to Shiro's training, he was able to get a little glimpse into the realm of boundary, but it was for a brief moment. But this brief moment was all that he needed to cause chaos in their ranks. Like a blender, he shredded through their backline thanks to the speed boost he got from the Takamikazuchi technique, letting him bypass their front line. Taking a step back in surprise, the queen looked at everything in shock since this had never happened before. One of her main skills was that she could rob someone of their senses and drag them into her throne world. She was one of the lesser queens, but she was still able to hold her own, or at least escape thanks to this. But looking at the current situation, She couldn't help but wonder if her powers were broken. None of them seemed affected, and the ones that were firing blindly. Despite them firing blindly, their weapons were so powerful that no one could stand up to them. Suddenly, a flicker of light appeared beside her as Lyssandra's sword cleaved towards her neck. Asterisk ping. Blocking the strike with a dagger, the queen took a few steps back, but Lysandra pressed forth. Grabbing her wrist, Lysandra pulled the queen slower to her and summoned a myriad of blades. You should have left immediately rather than fight us. Elbowing the queen in the jaw, Lysandra's sword pierced her body and shredded her in half. However, just as this happened, the body seemed to fade away to smoke. Realizing it was probably an escape skill, Lysandra clicked her tongue. TCH. Wanting to chase, her earpiece lit up. Don't worry, your aunt's got you covered. Kiyomi chuckled as Lysandra shrugged and gave up the chase. If Keiko says she's got it covered, Lysandra knew that she wouldn't need to worry about the queen escaping anymore. Hashtag. Ha ha ha. Panting heavily, the queen was dashing away from the area while keeping her throne world activated in order to delay them. Blood dripped from her stomach as there was a charred stab wound that was left by Lysandra's sword. What the hell? She muttered with a frown. Despite the two of them being tier 6, she knew that the angel woman far outclassed her. Just that single exchange told her that the stat disparity was enough for that woman to just brute force a victory without any skill. Too abnormal, she thought to herself. Suddenly, a flash of light appeared. Widening her eyes, the queen watched as a dagger pierced her throat before black runes slithered across her skin like corruption. First assassination against a queen, my lucky day. Keiko smiled as the black runes started to melt the queen's body. With a single flick of her dagger, the head and body was separated in one swift motion. Watching the corpse of the queen collapse in front of her, Keiko chuckled before flicking the blood off her knife. Shiro, the job's done. Surprisingly, I even got a title from that. Keiko smiled. Oh, what title did you get? Shiro asked curiously since she never got a title for killing queens. I got something called Queenslayer. Increased damage and stats when trying to assassinate a queen. Apparently, I got it since I killed a queen despite not being one myself. Keiko raised an eyebrow. Hearing this, Shiro paused for a moment before remembering that Nan Tian didn't get the final hit for killing the other queen. Ah, what a waste. If he managed to get a title like that, it'd be extremely helpful. Shiro mused to herself as she shook her head. Come back to the city for now. Lysandra should have the zone claimed in a few moments. Nodding her head, Keiko ended the call before glancing back at the queen's body, which was now disintegrating to ash. Hashtag. Without any hindrances, the zone was claimed. Unfortunately, there were no bonuses that came with this zone, which caused Shiro to understand that not just any tier 6 could invoke that kind of effect. Her guess was that only demigods or those close to this realm could, as both Izul and Nimue fit the requirement. Glancing up into the sky, Shiro could see 3 circles that had her crest on full display. Now that she had claimed 3 of the zones, there was definitely a big target on her back. However, she didn't mind. After all, from what she could tell, most of the queens here couldn't even hold a candle to Keiko, never mind Lysandra. If they got rid of the cannon fodder now, they wouldn't need to worry about getting stabbed in the back while fighting someone strong like Theria or Arnia. Shiro still wasn't too sure about where Cyrodiil stood in yet, since she seemed to be a battle junkie like her. Last time, they had fought against one another before teaming up to push back Arnia. During that battle, Shiro understood that Cyrodiil didn't seem to care too much about the rewards and was just there for a good time. Depending on what happens, she might even be able to rope her over as an ally rather than an enemy. The only problem with this is, Cyrodiil is the one who tortured the previous spirit queen to death, in front of Estrella no less. She knew that the moment Estrella came face to face with the Dragon Empress, a fight would most likely break out. I'll need to talk to Estrella before I deal with Cyrodiil. Even if I want her as an ally, I need to make sure Estrella is fine with it first, Shiro thought to herself. Plus, she wasn't sure what the reception of the spirit race would be if they knew she allied herself with the one who tortured their last queen. If one thought about it, the downfall of the spirit race before Shiro came around was a direct result of Cyrodiil's actions. If it wasn't for her, perhaps the spirit race would be doing okay, and Shiro wouldn't have gotten the queen title. Shaking her head, Shiro decided to visit Estrella. Hashtag. While that was happening, Kane was currently patrolling the city. Jumping up and launching off a few buildings, she landed on the roof of a shop and sat down. Swinging her legs back and forth, she looked at the crests that decorated the horizon. Sigh. Shirone's doing fun stuff again, she muttered while glancing down at her hands. She figured that after being stuck in a dungeon and being somewhat powerful meant that she could help Shiro out more often, but right now she was just patrolling the city every day. It wasn't that she disliked it, but rather she didn't feel like she was contributing much. Reaching into her inventory, she pulled out 2 rusted katanas that were on the verge of breaking. While she couldn't see the durability, she figured that it was something similar to 2 of 100. These were the katanas that Shiro had gifted her when they parted ways in New York. The swords were named Crimson Devourers, and they could be leveled up from level 5 all the way to 50. During her time in the dungeon, it was this weapon that stayed by her side and kept her going. A part of her liked to imagine that Shiro was next to her, protecting her from harm. Even when she surpassed level 50, she still kept these weapons in her inventory as a reminder of what helped her. She had tried to get these fixed and upgraded with Helian's help, but it was a little difficult. Not only were they upgraded already with nanobots, but it was also cursed to lose most of its abilities. Shaking her head, she put them back in her inventory. Standing up, she looked at the katanas that she was using right now. It was something that Helion had made for her, and she had to admit, they were sharp, but they didn't hold the same meanings for her. Heis, I should go back to patrol, Kane muttered as she prepared to jump back down. However, before she did, she noticed a small flicker of light in one of the alleys. Raising her eyebrow, she held her katana on her waist and skipped over the rooftops. Securing herself to the wall, she glanced down and saw that it was 3 people trying to set up a portal. There were glowing relics in their hands, and it seems like their only purpose was to set down an anchor point of sorts. That's not acceptable, Kane muttered as she narrowed her eyes. Since it's late into the night, her red aura was extremely eye-catching as she jumped down. Noticing a shadow enlarging beneath them, one of the men looked up and caught a glimpse of Kane. Before he could even react, Kane grabbed his head and slammed it against the floor. This is Asharia Patrol. State what you are doing before I run out of mercy, Kane warned, taking a low stance with one hand on her katana handle. Shocked at her sudden appearance, one of the men charged towards her as a barrier appeared around the final person who was responsible for the portal. I'm guessing you're desperate to resort to this. Even though Shirone gave you a home like this, you still chose to sabotage her. What did the queens offer for you to do this? What would make you destroy a place like this? Kane asked, easily sidestepping his charge and hit him on the back of the head, forcing him to fall forward. Hey, you wouldn't get it. Color of the soul? Bullshit. All I know is that she killed my wife and gracefully allowed me to live here. I don't know how much I can do, but I know the other queen would be able to do more. The man grinned as he tore his shirt apart, revealing a rune. Sigh. Unless your wife had committed a serious sin, Shirone would have allowed them to enter the city. She is not one without mercy. If she was indeed killed, then sorry. It meant that Shirone couldn't take any risks, just like how I can't take risks with you lot. May you rest in peace. Kane sighed as she closed her eyes. Tightening her grip on the katana, she drew her blade. In a single breath, there were now 3 corpses around her feet. The barrier that he had prepared was erased thanks to the properties of the sword in her hands. Walking over to the spot where they tried to leave a tracker of sorts, she stabbed her sword down and destroyed the formation. This is Kane from Patrol. Is there anyone listening in command? Kane said as she pulled out an earpiece. This is Command, Nantion speaking. Is there something wrong? Nantion said as Shiro had just left a moment ago. I found some suspicious individuals that were trying to set up a tracker of sorts. Not sure which queen they made a deal with, but Shirone might want to look at this. I just got their signals on the radar. They seem to have something masking their aura, but it's short-lasting. All right, I'll pass the message on to Shiro once she returns. You should go rest for now. I'll have more drones patrol around tonight. Nantion smiled as Kane nodded her head. Looking back at the corpses, she watched as drones appeared at her location and cleaned up everything before scanning the half-finished formation. How did they even come in contact with the queen? ####. So even after all my prep, the camouflage only lasted a short while. I guess it is also unlucky that they ran into patrol. As the queen of trickery, it leaves a bit of a sour taste. Aisha giggled. She was one of the first queens that Shiro had met in the New Age, and one where they fought to a tie. Discarding the 3 dolls in her hand, she glanced over at her shelf that was filled with dolls. Who should I use next? She muttered with a small smile. Walking towards Estrella's room, Shiro received a call from Nantion. Sup? Did something happen? Shiro asked. She had left Nantion behind since she figured that this talk should take less than 10 minutes. She didn't expect to get a call not too long after she left the room. Kane's found something quite serious, but she's taken care of them now. 3 people tried to open a portal, or rather, mark down our location within the city. The fact that they managed to get past all of our security is surprising already, but it seems like they've made a contract with another queen. It seems like our city's location has been compromised, Nantion reported as Shiro furrowed her brows. Wait, someone managed to get through the security? This is a concern. I should have filtered them out though. Increase our filtering process. Make it a little harder to get citizenship here, so that they have to prove they're not working for another queen. Shiro said as Nantion nodded. No contract still. Nope. All right, I'll get it done by sunrise. Nantion smiled. You don't have to, you know. You can deal with it when you wake up. Shiro raised an eyebrow. It's fine. I'm waiting for you anyways. I'll just deal with it now, if you insist. Talking for a little longer, Shiro ended the call. Arriving in front of Estrella's door, Shiro wanted to knock on it when she realized something important. Right now it's 3 a.m. in the morning. There's a high chance that she'll be sleeping. Am I really going to talk to her about the person that tortured her queen in front of her? Thinking about this, Shiro furrowed her brows and turned around. Yeah, let's wait until tomorrow more dash. Shiro, did you need me for something? Estrella opened her door and glanced out. She had sensed Shiro waiting out her door, so she was wondering what Shiro was doing. Estrella, I thought you were sleeping. Shiro raised an eyebrow as she acted as though she hadn't been loitering here for a moment. Well, I was checking over a few things since you hosted a raid tonight. Want to come in? Estrella asked as Shiro contemplated for a moment before nodding her head. Sure. Entering the room, Shiro glanced around and could see that Estrella was setting up for a new spell. What were you thinking of making? Shiro asked curiously. I was thinking of making a banishment-type spell. Seal them away in the void and force them in a contract that stops them from leaving. Estrella said as Shiro raised an eyebrow. That sounds quite difficult. Trying to seal someone stronger than you in another dimension is hard, and those weaker than you can just be killed. Shiro said as not many bother with banishment spells due to this reason. Plus, the spell also has a high chance of failing on those with roughly the same strength as you. I know, hence why I'm planning something that can solve this. I focus on space magic, so there are loopholes that can be worked around. The largest problem with banishment spells is that the spell has to work 2 jobs at once, forcing them in a different dimension and sealing them away. For me, with my proficiency in space magic, that first step is easy, so I don't need to worry. I can direct most of the magic to sealing them instead. Estrella explained as Shiro thought about it for a moment. I can help you with that. Some of the runes that I know are perfect for restrain and sealing. However, before that, I want to talk to you about something first. Shiro said as she took a deep breath. Emin? Sure, do you want a seat? Estrella offered as Shiro nodded her head. So you know that the Dragon Queen, or rather, the Dragon Empress tortured the previous queen, right? Shiro said as Estrella furrowed her brows and nodded her head. Yes, I do. How can I not know when it was performed in front of me? Estrella replied as Shiro nodded her head. For you see, Cyrodiil, the Dragon Empress seems to be carefree. Her ambitions are elsewhere for now, and I'll be honest. Having her as an ally would be helpful considering what I have seen thus far. During the first event, she didn't have much of a care for the rewards, but only wanted to fight. Shiro said as Estrella stayed silent. I'm not saying we have to make her an ally since we might become enemies in the future, but her help would be appreciated. I'm leaving the final decision to you since this is something that is related to you. If you don't want to be her ally, then we won't. Hearing this, Estrella leaned back and closed her eyes. Shiro, while I may have my grudges against the Dragon Empress for torturing and killing the previous queen in front of me, I can open my eyes and see what's important. My grudges are small in the grand scheme of things. If allying with the one who killed the previous queen can keep you safe, reduce the danger that you face, I'm more than happy to make an alliance with her. Estrella said as she looked at Shiro dead in the eyes. My loyalty is towards you. While the past is important, I'd rather protect the one that's living and breathing in front of me. I see. All right, don't worry. It's not like we're begging for an alliance with her. We'll see how things go from here. Shiro smiled as she stood up. Walking over to the table, Shiro tapped the surface and left a book. This book should contain all the runes that you may need. Their descriptions and how to use them are written inside. Have a good night's rest, Shiro said as she left the room. Looking at the book, Estrella took a deep breath and stood up and walked to the window. I'm sorry, but my priorities are Shiro, she muttered while looking at the crest of the Dragon Empress in the distance. Clenching her fists, she closed her eyes and remembered the scene that had haunted her. It was the reason she left the Spirit Council in the first place. Her inability to protect the queen even though she was there. glancing back at the table. She wanted to do some more work, but shook her head. ####. Standing outside the door, Shiro furrowed her brows before walking towards the command center. Calling Nantion, Shiro looked towards the city through the window. So fast. I suppose you finished talking with Estrella. Nantion raised an eyebrow as Shiro nodded her head. I did. We'll talk to Cyrodiil in the future, but not yet. For now, I want you to get all of the information and footage from the incident with the 3 traitors. Send their corpses to me as well. I'll talk to their souls. There should be some traces left. Shiro narrowed her eyes as Nantion nodded his head. All right, I'll get everything prepared. Do you want the corpses in the command room or elsewhere? I'll make a new room next to the command room. Send everything there. Got it. Ending the call, Shiro reached into her inventory and wanted to get a cup of juice. However, seeing that she ran out, she clicked her tongue. Annoying, she muttered. Snapping her finger, she opened a portal to the private fridge in the food hall that was filled with juice. It was something she prepared just in case she ever ran out. Resupplying her inventory with juice, she closed the portal, finishing the cup in a few short moments. She threw the cup into her inventory. Time to get to work, I suppose. She sighed. ###. Entering the new room that she had created, Shiro could see Nantion waiting by the side with a bunch of documents. I've grabbed all of the documents related to what they've been up to during their entire stay in Asharia, their jobs, habits, and so on, Nantion said as Shiro nodded her head. Hopefully we won't need to check through all of that. Taking a step forward, green fire erupted around her as a black dress wrapped around her body. Activating her true spirit nature, she reached out towards the 3 corpses. A green glow appeared in her eyes as she could see faint trails of their souls. Grabbing the empty air, 3 chains appeared. Perfect, the connection is still there. Shiro smiled as she dragged the chain. Suddenly, 3 portals appeared as 3 figures could be seen with chains around their necks. Grabbing the one in the middle, a rune appeared on the back of Shiro's hand as she scanned for the information she needed. *bang. Popping the soul like a balloon, a jester could be seen with a smile. Surprise, it's me, your old friend. They've already signed a contract with me, so as their contractor, I have to ensure their privacy. The jester waved in an exaggerated motion before disappearing. Before the final soul could explode, Shiro narrowed her eyes. Souls are my domain, clown. Slamming her hand down, the contract appeared on his chest as the runes were extinguished immediately. Grabbing his head, Shiro scanned his soul for all of the information she wanted. Reading his soul, Shiro couldn't help but furrow her brows. She didn't know how the trickster queen did it, but she managed to find a way to the city. No clues could be found in the person's memories except for the fact that she approached them in the form of a young girl that would change her appearance all the time. Scanning through her own memories, she wanted to see if the appearance matched up to any of the documents, but nothing came up. How did she even evade my detection? Shiro thought to herself with a frown, since this wasn't exactly the best news. Not only has a queen infiltrated the city, but she also didn't know how she did it. Trying to drag out more information from the soul, she was disappointed to find out that this was everything he knew. Seems like he was just being exploited for his revenge and anger. He had grudges against me for killing someone he was close with, she muttered, dropped the corpses and dusted her hand. Watching the soul get dragged away, she glanced towards Nantion. We're tightening up security. Have all of the cameras check the identity of everyone they see. The moment anyone suspicious appears, I want you to send me a report on their movements during that day and send a few scouts to trail them. I'm not sure how well they'll do considering the fact that our enemy is a queen. So make sure you keep up to date with all the information the scouts relay. Information is key when it comes to dealing with someone like her, Shiro ordered. Understood. I will report everything I see. Nantion nodded. Good. Heis, such a tiring night. I need a good night's rest after all of this. Shiro yawned lightly, discussing some of their plans while making their way back to their room. Shiro wondered about what she should be doing tomorrow. Theria was still taking over zones, but she wasn't the main danger anymore. As much as she would like to go out and crush Theria's army, she needed to sort out the rat inside her city first. If she didn't take care of this, it would become a nuisance. While she might be out fighting, the city would be in danger. She trusts that the people here can kill Aisha considering their power, but the problem would be casualties. If she stays behind, she can guarantee that no one would be killed. I need to track down all of these proxies that Aisha set in the city. She must have a way to be able to camouflage them if I can't find it, Shiro thought with a frown. Shaking her head, she rested for the night. ###. The first thing that she did the next morning was to set the order for everyone to defend the zones without venturing out for now. They'll stay their ground until Aisha's situation has been sorted. Since she didn't want to raise any suspicion, she made things seem like they're normal. The soldiers were preparing for the next battle. Only a few tier SIXs remain in the city, and her own signature was camouflaged so that she can move around undetected. Do you need any help, or are you going to do this alone? Nantion asked as Shiro smiled. I can do this alone, don't worry. I'm not fighting, just tracking for now. I want to track down all the proxies and destroy them before they do some annoying *T in my city. Shiro smiled before teleporting away. Understanding that she'll be back every 10 minutes or so, Nantion chuckled and started his own tasks that were given to him by Shiro. ####. Stretching her body lightly, Shiro sat down on the top of the main tower. Looking down at the city and all of the sections that branched off the main platform, Shiro narrowed her eyes. Let's see, she muttered as tier 6 magic circles appeared around her. Creating a control panel of sorts, she started to draw some runes down. Most of the runes were used for tracking, and it followed the signature that was shown yesterday when Aisha tried to kill her puppets. Closing her eyes, faint golden tethers started to stretch through the city, but they were cut off before they could get far. Seeing this, Shiro furrowed her brows. There's no connection, she muttered. It was as though that signal just ceased to exist. Except for that one moment where she interfered, this signal was no longer here. Narrowing her eyes, Shiro tried a few more times, but they all had the same result. Leaning back for a moment, she had another idea. Black mist wrapped around her body as she entered her true spirit nature. Adjusting some of the runes that she had, she decided to track her soul instead. Compared to mana that could be disguised at will, disguising the soul was much harder. Opening her eyes, a soft green glow could be seen as a tether was struggling to form. However, compared to the tether that tried to track the mana, this one was holding on strong. Standing up, Shiro started to pursue where this tether was going. ####. Fiddling around with one of her dolls, Aisha wanted to prepare for the next assault when she felt a strange tug. A green aura started to appear on her dolls and slowly made their way towards her. Widening her eyes, she realized what was happening. If you can't find the mana, find the soul, huh? This one is rather diverse in her proficiencies. Aisha muttered with a forced smile. With a snapping of fingers, the dolls started to break one after another, and the green tether was cut off for now. However, from their ashes, auras started to converge once more. TCH. Clicking her tongue in annoyance, Aisha thought about what she needed to do. Like a snake, the tether slowly moved towards her before lashing out. She tried to dodge, but dodging was out of the question since it was connected to her soul. The moment the connection was formed, she felt a pair of cold eyes staring at her as a tier 6 magic circle appeared, creating an avatar. Well, this is certainly a surprise. It has been quite a few months since I last saw you. Last time you ruined the city I was about to take over and forced a tie even though I was weakened. Aisha forced a smile as Shiro only narrowed her eyes at Aisha. Without saying anything, she pulled her hand back and prepared to attack when Aisha jumped back and activated a tier 6 magic circle. I didn't want to do this, but as the queen of trickery, this should be easy for me. I can only say I'll see you next time. Ciao. Aisha grinned as she waved her hand. Suddenly, black runes appeared around her body as she turned to ash. The connection Shiro had with her soul was forcefully severed as there was now no way to track her. What the hell? Shiro muttered with a frown since she didn't think Aisha would detonate her soul like that. Doing so would mean she gives up on the chance of ever reincarnating. Furrowing her brows, Shiro looked at all the dolls that had contracts lined up by the side. All of them were now contractless, but they were still around. Seeing that they're retaining their powers despite the lack of a contract, Shiro narrowed her eyes. She's still alive, but everything linked to her soul has been severed. Taking a deep breath to calm herself, Shiro sighed and dismissed her avatar. Unfortunately, it seemed like catching the one known was the queen of trickery was not going to be easy. ####. Panting heavily, Aisha coughed up a mouthful of blood in her own room within her city. Laying on the bed, she was visibly worn out from her stunt. I didn't think I would actually need this skill considering the side effects, but other skills wouldn't let me get her off my trail. Aisha grinned as this was a skill that she had obtained when she became a tier 6. Faux Death, a skill that kills you and wipes out all tracking linked to you. It allows you to respawn at a pre-designated spot, and while you retain your privileges as a queen, it is decreased by 5%. This skill will even wipe out tracking used by the gods. The cooldown of this skill was short for its effects, but the cost is great. After 10 uses of this, she would only be at 50% of her privileges, and once that happens, she was good as gone from this race. I can't afford to lose more of this by playing with fire, she thought to herself, since she didn't think Shiro would have so many ways of tracking her. Not only that, but the range of her tracking was also a little crazy. Thankfully, she was in a safe location away from her city, otherwise things might get bad for her. Shaking her head, she decided to set her eyes on other queens for now. Making her way back to the command center, she saw Nantion with a frown on his face. What happened? Shiro asked as Nantion glanced back. Honestly, it'll be easier if you saw it yourself. He sighed, gesturing towards the screen. He moved aside so that she could see everything. When she saw what was displayed on the screen, Shiro couldn't help but frown, since she understood why Nantion was concerned. Theria had just taken over all of the main zones except for the one owned by the Dragon Empress. Looking at her army from the cameras, she could tell that quite a few of them were Tier 6 monsters. Wait, how many Tier SIXS does she have? Shiro thought to herself as she understood something quite shocking. As the Beast Queen, she has control over most of the monsters roaming around. While her authority is broad and cannot defeat someone like Dragon Empress when it comes to dragons, she has access to a myriad of Tier SIXS thanks to the new age bringing more dangerous monsters into this world. With that being the case, it's only natural that her army would be constructed of only Tier SIXS rather than weaker monsters. Tapping her finger across the table surface, Shiro took a deep breath and sat down. There's 3 days left of this event, and it seems like Theria is going all out in securing zones now. She's not afraid of fighting anyone, since only the Dragon Empress poses a risk, but she's not moving from her zone. As long as Theria doesn't move against her, she's safe, Shiro said as Nantion nodded his head. Yes, but at the same time, she's making herself a target for everyone else. I think that's what she wants. When it comes to Tier 6, she's not losing to anyone. In a world where Tier 6 monsters have become common, do you think anyone here can outnumber how many she has got? While we may have quality over quantity, you need to remember that some naturally born Tier 6 monsters are in a league of their own. We don't know what's the strongest unit that she is either. Shiro shook her head. However, we do have one advantage. We have an overwhelming attack force. Before the event ends, as long as we launch several raids against her zones at full strength, we'll be able to take over the points that she earns and snatch first place. Would that work? If we split our forces too much, we'll just get picked off one by one. That's assuming they have powerful Tier SIXS like us. If I have to fight a powerful Tier 6 while other Tier SIXS are trying to kill me, I can't say that I would be able to survive. Nantion asked as Shiro thought about it for a moment. I can deal with that easily. Even though I've been taking the front line for most of our fights, you forget that my main skill is ranged artillery. While all of you are fighting, I have the Argus network in space that can help out. Each of them can become a weapon and send down an orbital strike with 100% of my power without harming me. I doubt that there are any Tier SIXS that can survive a strike. And if they do, I'll teleport to the location and fight it personally. Error's skill is off cooldown, so I can extract them if I want. Shiro smiled and created a finger gun with her hand. Alright, it shouldn't be too bad. When do we want to launch the attack then? If we do it too close to the clock, there's no guarantee. There's also the problem of her Leviathan, remember? I can think of a way to deal with the Leviathan later when we run into him. For now, just focus on getting everyone ready for an all-out raid. We won't take any more zones since we need all of the help we can get. If we do need numbers, we have the soldiers, and I'll make some combat drones. I don't have any blueprints for them, but I'll figure something out later tonight. Shiro shrugged. What do you want to do in the meantime then? Nantion asked since Shiro didn't say what she was going to do herself. I think I want to pay an old acquaintance a visit. Shiro smiled, changing a camera. Glancing towards the screen, Nantion could see an empty crest transform into one with a woman in front of a snowflake. Understanding that the crest most likely belonged to the Ice Queen, Nantion nodded his head. Do you need me to come with you? He asked since she had her time limit of 10 minutes. It's fine. I'll see how far I can go since I can't be relying on you forever now, can I? Shiro shook her head. Of course, before I leave I need a little recharge. She chuckled. Moving her chair closer, she grabbed his sleeve and relaxed for a moment. Closing her eyes, she thought about the questions she wanted to ask the Ice Queen. Since the Ice Queen seemed knowledgeable, Shiro didn't want to make her an enemy if possible. However, if the need to kill her rises, she wouldn't hesitate. Hesitation would only lead to her being taken off guard after all. Since she was able to win an event even with Theria participating, she needed to be careful. There's no telling what she won since they weren't able to find out. However, thinking about this, Shiro realized something. If they don't know, Misa might know since she was in this event. Actually, before I go, I'm going to talk to Misu for a bit, Shiro said as she stood up. All right, she's in her office right now. Instead of something to do with a clinic, she started a detective agency of sorts. She'll help you find anything you lost or look for a person. If that person is someone that died in the beginning of the New Age, she'll try and find a connection back to them. So far, there hasn't been anything that required her to revive people, but I assume that she'll be calling for you when the need arises, Nantian said as Shiro raised an eyebrow. A detective agency? She muttered in mild surprise since she didn't think Misu was the type to become a detective. Yup, you'll be surprised at how effective her methods are. Trying to detect a small, undead being in an area filled with mana is rather difficult. He chuckled, receiving a map on her phone that showed the path to Mrs. Office. Shiro left the command center after saying goodbye. Since she could teleport, there wasn't much need to walk there, but remembering that she wanted to see how long she could last, Shiro decided to walk there instead. Plus, it was also good to see the city with her own eyes. Disguising herself, she was glad to see that everyone was happy, but that was only on the surface. She could still remember the three that died. They had grievances towards her since she had killed their loved ones and didn't let them into the city. Understanding that there were probably more people like that, she wondered if her methods were right. Even if the soul was the best factor to judge a person, there was still a chance that dark souls can change. Sometimes it becomes dark due to wounds that they have suffered, and the right person can help them. If she tried to create a place where only the ones with good souls are, then that place would eventually crumble away. By filtering them out to this extent, it's taking away the chances for people to change, and she understands that there are many who are capable of that. Even if what she's doing seems merciful to her, some may also just see it as tyranny. She's not forcing them to stay, but she's also killing those she deemed not worthy to stay. Scratching her hair, Shiro sighed. Would a third city do? She muttered. She wasn't sure how things would work right now since she had to make sure nothing harms the city she has now. Both Asharia and the second city were in a pretty good state since no one here wants to fight, so she can't allow those with too dark of a soul to enter here. Or at least until she was sure. If she was to create a third city, it should be a decent place to allow those with darker souls to reform themselves. I'll think of it later. Nantian should have some good ideas in regards to that, Shiro thought to herself, since she wasn't good at dealing with people. To her, what she was doing seemed fine until she learned of what happened to the three. Of course, there's still a limit since she won't allow anyone with too dark of a soul to even come close to her city, but giving people a second chance should be fine, unless they spit it back in her face. At that point, her mercy would have run out. Arriving outside of Misu's building, Shiro looked at the name of the building, and the corner of her eye started to twitch. Mrs. Fantasy 100% Guaranteed Detective Agency. Feeling speechless by the name, she decided to enter and ask questions later. The moment she opened the door, she heard the bell ring like in restaurants. We have a customer. Essel, go greet them, Mrs. shouted out from upstairs. Quickly scrambling to his feet, Shiro could see Misu's subordinate hiding his phone in his pockets before adjusting his suit. Welcome to Mrs. Fantasy 100% Guaranteed Detective Agency. No matter what you lose or what you find, we'll locate it within 2 days, Essel declared as Shiro looked at him blankly. MN. Realizing that his tie was crooked, he quickly adjusted it and flashed the best smile he could muster. Staring at him with dead fish eyes, Shiro was about to turn and leave. Before you leave, why don't you try a freebie first? As the first customer, you get the first service for free. We can guarantee that we'll complete it perfectly, Essel said as he quickly blocked her way out. Sigh. Waving her finger, Shiro closed the door with mana before dismissing her disguise. Your Highness, I apologize about that. Essel froze up in shock before bowing. It's fine. Care to tell me what's happening here? Shiro asked while massaging her eyes. You see, we haven't gotten any customers just yet. They seem to be frightened off by Mrs. Naming sense of the shop. They seem to believe it as a scam. Essel sighed as Shiro shook her head. I see. Regardless, I need to talk to Misu anyway, so you can think of me as your first customer, Shiro said as Essel led her into the shop. Coming down from the second floor, Misu was wearing stereotypical detective clothing with a pipe cigar. Breathing in, she coughed violently and threw the cigar away. How may I help, Shiro? Mrs. said as she noticed who was in the chair. Hi, so this is your store. Shiro said as she glanced around with a difficult expression. Yup, I was wondering about what kind of place I wanted to make. My life as a cleric was behind me after becoming a necromancer, so becoming a healer was out of the table. Plus, I've already lived through that kind of life once. I wondered if I should teach necromancy, but well, it's necromancy, so I'm not eager about teaching that. I wanted to help people, so I looked around the internet, and seeing as how quite a few people struggle with losing things and need help finding them, I decided to become a detective. Mrs. smiled happily as she took off her jacket and hung it up. So if anyone needs help tracking someone down, finding their lost items, they can come here and commission us to find it for them. And seeing as how Essel named me the first customer, I suppose business is not going well. Shiro raised an eyebrow. Well, it's only been a day and a half. I'll get business soon. Misu coughed as Shiro could see the doubt in her eyes. I see. Well, regardless, take me as your first client then. I want to know some information on what the Ice Queen obtained when she won one of the events along with anything she has been involved with. Shiro asked as Misu thought about it for a moment. Well, that's easy. When the Ice Queen won, she obtained a weapon that heavily amplified her power with ice along with 2 skills. We don't know the second skill, but the first allows her to summon the embodiment of ice in a battlefield. She used this skill against Theria and managed to push her back since the gains weren't worth the losses. We don't know the cooldown since she hasn't used it since, but it would be safe to assume that she has the skill back already. Until you have something that can combat her ice, I would suggest that you avoid fighting her. At least, that's the advice I would give to other queens. Mrs. shrugged as she sat down in front of Shiro. In terms of the things she's been involved with, there's not much. On the surface, she's pretty quiet. It just seems like she's focused on developing her cities rather than making more. I have eyes on 2 of her cities, but no clue on where the main one is. Hearing this, Shiro furrowed her brows. How strong is her ice? If I was to fight her using fire, how effective do you think this would be? Shiro asked as golden fire appeared in her palm. Due to her connection with both Adi and Een, her own flames have been empowered to their standard. This, well, it's certainly powerful and could counter her quite nicely. But since there are a lot of variables that we don't know about yet, try to avoid a fight if you can. I haven't had any run-ins with the Ice Queen, so I can't say much when it comes to her personality, quirks, and so on. Mrs. sighed as Shiro nodded her head. Well, this is good enough. Better than going in blind. I mean, if you want more, I can get some information for you by tomorrow. Misu offered as Shiro raised her eyebrow. You can. Yup. Why do you think I have the 100% guarantee on the nameplate? Mrs. smirked as she gestured outside the door. Fair enough then. If you can get me some information by tomorrow, then it would be great. What kind of information would you be able to get? Shiro asked curiously. It depends, but anything specific you have in mind? How about some information on her whereabouts and her guards within the fort? If she's not there, it would be rather bad for me to show up personally, since it'll make it seem like I'm beneath her. Shiro said as Misu nodded her head. That's easily doable. Come back by sunrise, and I'll have everything ready. All right. Oh, even though this is supposed to be a freebie, I'll leave a little tip. Shiro smiled as she left the building. Snapping her finger, a new stamp appeared next to the name. The stamp had 5 stars and a Shiro seal of approval written next to it. Seeing that the queen of this city had just exited the new store that was built, everyone was surprised for a moment as they watched her open a portal and leave the place. Glancing at each other, their view on this shady place started to change. After all, if the queen of the city gave it her seal of her approval, especially when it's someone like Shiro, it might not be as bad as they thought. The name might be a little weird, but they can overlook that. One by one, people started to queue up outside the building, with new customers entering each moment. Misu found herself to be rather busy. ####. Making her way back to the command center, Shiro could see that Nantian was a little surprised to see her back so soon. Misu said that she was going to investigate the Ice Queen for me before I go visit her so that I have some downtime. Shiro explained as she sat down. I could tell. It's become a hot topic quite quickly. Nantian said as he pointed towards the video of her leaving the store and giving it her seal of approval. Her store does have quite a interesting name, I have to admit. Nantian chuckled as Shiro nodded her head. That's true, but it's fine. She's enjoying herself after all. Shiro chuckled seeing the video of Misu grinning from ear to ear as she received more requests. Compared to her future self, this Misu seems much happier. Her problem of reviving people properly will be solved once the event ends, and she can enjoy herself by indulging with her hobbies. Seeing that Misu could enjoy herself to this extent since her wish has been fulfilled, Shiro wondered if she can do the same for the others. After all, The system was blatantly lying to them about their second chance. The hopes their people have for them have long extinguished, and all the queens were working towards a non-existent goal. Whatever the Ice Queen desires, whatever the Beast Queen desires, it doesn't matter since the system won't be the one to grant it. At the end of their journey, if they win this new age, all that awaits them is the cold abyss where everything is reset. She doesn't know what will happen should she get rid of this system, nor does she know how she could achieve this. But with the things that she has discovered so far, she could already understand why she got rid of it in the future. Narrowing her eyes at her system interface, Shiro thought about the methods that might work when it comes to removing the system. Let's just hope that it doesn't come down to it soon. I still need the system around for a little while. Shiro thought to herself and shook her head. With her waiting for Misu's information, she decided to just relax for the rest of the day and prepare herself for tomorrow. Waking up early in the morning, Shiro glanced out of the window and saw that it was just before sunrise. Remembering that Misu told her to collect the information by sunrise, Shiro got changed and prepared to make her way over. Since it was still early, Shiro didn't want to wake up Nantion just yet. While she was waiting, she glanced towards Varish Lyre and saw that there were small changes to who had conquered each zone, but overall, Theria still occupied the most zones. Narrowing her eyes, Shiro could see a few monsters flying around her zones before settling back down on the battlements. She wasn't sure what tier they are, but from what she could tell so far, from their appearances, there's a good chance that they were at least tier 5. I can probably one-shot them. Shiro thought to herself, but decided against that for now since that'll just be alerting Theria on what happened. Seeing that the sun was starting to rise, Shiro made her way towards Mrs. Agency. Glancing back towards the sleeping Nantion, Shiro took a deep breath and continued walking. She had already spent quite a few minutes just waiting by the side, so there was no way she could finish everything before her 10-minute limit. However, since she wanted to push herself more rather than lean on Nantion all the time, she kept going. Ignoring the twisting shadows that filled her peripherals, Shiro kept her eyes forward, blocking out the whispers in her mind. Shiro could feel a little lightheaded, but it was better than before. Remembering the fact that there was a chance to save Isilia, Shiro kept moving forward. Knocking on Misu's door, she waited for a moment before the door opened, revealing Misu. "Morning. You seem a little pale. Are you feeling all right?" Misu asked as Shiro chuckled. "Yes, I'm fine. Have you got the information?" Shiro asked with a small smile. "Yes, I have. Care for a bit of breakfast?" "Essel's just cooking something up right now," Misu offered as Shiro thought about it for a moment. "If it's not too much of a bother, then sure." "Essel, can you make another portion for Shiro? I'll give her the info while we wait." "Got it." Hearing a response from Essel, Misu smiled and led Shiro inside, gesturing for her to sit down on the sofa. Misu grabbed a few documents that she had compiled from her drawer and laid them down on the desk. "While I was unable to find out where the Ice Queen was herself, I did get the other information in regards to how many guards are in the zone and who is the lifeline." Receiving the document, Shiro flipped through it and memorized everything. Right now, there were several tier SIXS gathered within the zone, protecting it from any attacks. While the lifeline isn't a well-known tier 6 and seems rather new, one of the Ice Queen's closest guards is protecting it from the side. Thinking about this, Shiro figured that if she sent Addy as an ambassador, they could arrange a meeting between the two of them. Plus, it'll also show her power if they saw Addy, who is a pseudo-demigod. "Thank you. What do you think about another commission?" Shiro asked with a smile. "Another one? Sure. Depends on what it is. It might take a while, though." Misu warned as Shiro nodded her head. "That's fine. I expect it to take a while to begin with. Can you help me find out about Theria's main forces, how many tier SIXS she has, and possibly where her main city is?" Shiro asked as Misu nodded her head. "And just to make sure, Theria is the Beast Queen, right?" Misu asked as Essel brought over 2 sets of an selective English breakfast consisting of sausages, eggs, bacon and beans, mushrooms, toast with some fried potato waffles by the side. "Yup, she is. Also, I didn't think potato waffles were part of the English breakfast." Shiro asked with a raised eyebrow. "Oh, they're not. I just like them." Misu shrugged as she eyed the waffles with eagerness. Seeing this, Shiro couldn't help but chuckle. Storing the information away, Shiro started to dig in. However, during her meal, her hand paused as the beans started to seem like blood in her eyes. Blinking a few times to get rid of the hallucination, Shiro sighed and finished her meal quickly. Once she had finished everything, she passed the plate to Essel. "Thank you. That was a great meal." She smiled as Essel nodded, taking the plate back to the kitchen. "Well, I'll need to go now. I'll be making use of this information today before there are any changes. Just send me an email once you got what I asked for," Shiro said as Misu nodded. Leaving the building, Shiro made her way back. While she was forcing herself to not use the portal, she was close to running pace with the speed she was going. Arriving back in her room, Shiro collapsed on the chair and closed her eyes. "Need a towel?" Nantion offered as Shiro didn't even notice that he was awake. "Emin?" "Yes, please." Shiro nodded, receiving the towel and wiping off the sweat on her face. Taking a deep breath, she calmed herself and looked at the time. Roughly 17 minutes, huh? Shiro thought to herself. A safe time would be around 13 minutes to 15 if she was pushing it. With the knowledge that Administrator 4 has given her, her condition had improved quite a bit. All she needs to do now was keep going like this, and soon her mental state should return back to normal. "Feeling better?" Nantion asked as Shiro nodded. Better. That's good. So did you get what you needed from Misu?" "Somewhat. It's a shame that we still don't know where the Ice Queen is, but I do know what their defenses are like within the zone. With how Een and Addy are, I think I should be able to trust the two of them to act as my envoys," Shiro said as she furrowed her brows. Een and Addy were the best for this mission considering their elements, but there was a slight problem. Een was rather volatile and Addy liked to follow his big sis around and cause just as much chaos. While he doesn't usually act up, he doesn't keep his big sis actions in check like how Lysandra would. With Lysandra holding his own, Een pretty much has free reign. Tapping her chin, Shiro narrowed her eyes and decided to give it a try. If her future self could entrust tasks to them, the current her should be able to as well. "So you want to trust Een and Addy to do this?" Nantion asked with an awkward smile. "Yes, is something wrong?" Saying nothing, Nantion pulled out a video of both Een and Addy partying up till late with everyone else. They were drinking and having contests of strength against the citizens while everyone was laughing. Seeing how Een was taking Addy of all people drinking, Shiro's aura turned malevolent. Nantion could almost imagine Shiro's face being blurred out with only a pair of glowing eyes that sent chills down one's spine. "Where are they right now?" "Surely not having a hangover, right?" Shiro asked as Nantion coughed. Switching to one of the cams, he displayed both Addy and Een sleeping on a table with a bunch of people also passed out around them. Addy was drooling, and in his hands was a half-filled cup with what seems to be left-over alcohol spilling out. As for Een, she was chewing on Addy's arm while he was sleeping. Poochie. Standing up without saying anything, Shiro made her way toward their location. A simple sweep of the city told her where they were, and seeing as how it was always the food hall, Shiro had the idea of demolishing the place. However, that would be going a bit far. All she needed to do was remind Een that Addy was still young. ###*. Yawning loudly, Een blinked her eyes as she removed the arm from her mouth. She had thought it was a really tough piece of steak, but it turns out to be Addy's arm. Rubbing her eyes, she could see that most of the people had already gone home, and it was mostly just her and Addy now. "Addy, it's morning." Een said as she nudged Addy slightly. "He won't wake up for a while. He's still having a hangover." Hearing the voice, Een immediately sobered up and coughed. "Mother," she addressed formally and sat up straight. "Daughter, care to explain why my darling son is currently having a hangover?" Shiro smiled as Een stayed silent before performing the best bow she could. "I'm resigned to my fate." She knew there was no getting out of this, so she resigned herself. "I have a proposition for you. Depending on how well you do this, the punishment can be ignored." Shiro smiled as Yin's eyes brightened. "Take your brother and act as envoys for me. I'll detoxify him now so that you two know what to say," Shiro said as she snapped her finger. Blinking his eyes, Addy yawned. "Big sis, that apple juice you offered tastes weird. Can I have more?" "I'm sorry, sis." Addy apologized as he poked his fingers together. Currently, they were both walking towards the Ice Queen's zone while Een was rubbing her, but since she got the spanking of her life. Seeing Addy's apologetic expression, Een sighed and patted his head. "Next time don't mouth off randomly when you wake up, okay? At least make sure Mum isn't around. Big sis has to take the blame for everything you know," Een said as she felt the urge to cry. She's been sabotaged by both Addy and the people in the food hall now. Sorry, Addy nodded, feeling guilty about what happened to Een. Pausing for a bit, Yin's lips curved into a smile and hugged Addy. "Heis, who told you to be so cute? Just makes big sis want to mess with you." Een laughed as she rubbed his hair. The reason why she decided to give him a try of the alcohol was because he looked so innocent and curious about the drink. There was a part of her that just wanted to mess with that innocent, and she couldn't hold herself back. Poking Addy's nose, Een transformed herself so that she looked more mature with a rather impressive pair on her chest. Do you think this would look more like an envoy, Addie? Een asked with a low voice as Addie nodded. MN, big sis looks more mature like this. Addie nodded, chuckling as his response. Een brought out a fan and covered her lower face. Waving her hand, her clothes fluttered before being exchanged with a different outfit. She was currently wearing a black and purple dress with patterns along the hem of the dress. It was something that Aram had made for her when she showed her this form, and it was bordering on the line of being seductive. Seeing his big sis get changed, Addie did the same and wore a black suit with a white shirt underneath. When Aram designed this suit for him, she had made it so that the suit jacket extended to his calves. Wearing a pair of white gloves, Addie adjusted the tie on his neck and frowned. MN, I still don't like the tie. It's too tight on my neck. It does look smart though. Look at how handsome you are. Een smiled as she pulled out a mirror for Addie and quickly styled his hair so that it looked neat. Let's go. Make sure you don't seem like a weak lamb for slaughter, okay? Een chuckled. If you do, they might want to mess with you like how Big Sis does. Don't worry, Big Sis, I know. I'm only like this since I'm comfortable with everyone in the food hall and Big Sis. Addie smiled brightly before his aura changed. Cracking his neck, he stood up straight and a dominating presence radiated from him. There was a mysterious light in his eyes which made him seem unpredictable. Despite looking refined, his aura made him seem like a volcano that was about to erupt at any moment. Gentle yet dangerous. Raising an eyebrow, Een smiled behind the fan and wondered what kind of woman Addie would bring back in the future. Regardless of her qualification, as long as Addie loves her, then she'll be fine. #####. Looking at the two shadows approaching from the distance, the guards couldn't help but swallow their saliva. Right now, it felt like two catastrophe-class monsters walking towards them as their aura already made it hard to breathe, even from that distance. Some of the weaker guards couldn't take it anymore and had to retreat for now. Even with so many tier SIXS in the zone, they still didn't feel safe. Halt! One of the guards shouted since they couldn't let them enter just like that. They still had to do their job. Continuing to walk, the two walked closer as the guards started to tighten their grip on their weapons, preparing for combat. I'd suggest that you don't do that. A beautiful voice rang out as the woman closed her fan and flashed a small smile. Feeling charmed for a moment, the guards froze up for a moment before regaining their senses. State your business. Looking back, the guards could see the Tier 6 captain walking out with a serious expression. We're here as messengers. Our mother knows your queen, so she wishes to arrange a meeting. Would it not be better for us to discuss this inside the castle? After all, too many eyes are watching right now. Een smiled as the captain narrowed his eyes. Who is your mother? She used to be a snow girl. I believe they met back in Mount Fuji. Your queen should recognize the name. Shiro. Een replied as the captain paused for a moment before nodding his head. Please come in. I apologize about our actions thus far. I hope you don't take offense. As you know, with how some people are, it is rather hard to give them a hospitable welcome. The captain smiled as Een nodded her head. None taken. Now please, lead the way. Jumping down, the captain led them inside the zone. Having the guards close the door behind him, he led the two further in. Once they reached the main room, the captain gestured toward the door. The one that you can discuss this with is inside. I'll have to excuse myself since I am responsible for the security of this place. The captain smiled as Een nodded. Ignoring the captain, she pushed open the door and saw two people within the main room. On the side, she could see a Tier 6 whose aura was definitely weaker compared to most and realized that he was probably the one that Shiro mentioned as being the lifeline. As for the one on the throne, her aura was much higher. Safi LVL 650 Blizzard Wraith. Greetings, children of Shiro. I am Safi, guard of the Ice Queen Kiona. I was informed by the guards that Her Highness Shiro wished to arrange a meeting. The woman asked with a smile as Een nodded. Indeed, it has been quite a while since the last meeting between my mother and Her Highness. She wishes to discuss something private that is not for our ears to know. Een smiled. I see. I will relay the message to my queen. How should I contact you when I get a response? Safi asked as Atesh stepped forward. Lady Safi, if you do not mind, I would like to stay here for the time being. That way, I can send the message to my mother once Her Highness has arranged a time for the meeting. As for the venue, my mother expressed that she did not mind and gives that choice to Queen Kiona. Atesh bowed slightly as Safi eyed Atesh for a moment before nodding her head. Understood. I shall get a room prepared for you at once, so make yourself at home. Talking for a little longer, Een left the zone while Atesh stayed behind. Pulling out an earpiece, Een called Shiro. Is the job done? Shiro asked as Ian nodded. Amen, it is. Addy's resting in their zone right now. Their defenses seem alright, and the only problem would be Safi, who is Kyonoa's guard, but the other tier, success, seem like a joke if I'm being honest. Ian replied as Shiro stayed silent for a moment. Alright, that's good to know. Of course, don't let your guard down, alright? Keep yourself hidden near the zone, and assist Atesh if a fight does break out. Shiro ordered as Ian nodded. Say, Mum, what if they try to seduce Addy? Pardon? I mean, I saw Safi eyeing Addy, and because Addy is so handsome and cute, don't you think he's a perfect catch for them? Ian said as Shiro stayed silent. Imagine this, Mom. Addy is sleeping peacefully. You know how he sleeps quite deeply, right? What if they took advantage of him without him knowing? I'm sending over a sniper. Take out anyone who tries to take advantage of my son without his permission. Shiro said as Ian agreed. Maybe that's a bit too much. I'm sure Addy can handle himself. Nantian said as Shiro shook her head. I know Addy can handle himself, but doing so would mean disturbing his sleep. Don't worry. This sniper will erase them completely, so he won't even notice and his sleep will be saved. Shiro reassured as Nantian was speechless, praying that the girls in the zone didn't do anything over the line. Nantian watched as Shiro assembled a sniper and sent it to Ian through a portal. ####. Receiving news of Shiro wanting to arrange a meeting between the two of them, Kyona smiled, remembering the level 100 snow girl that she had met previously. It has been a while now. Both she and that dragon queen have become empresses, and they can both fight people higher ranked than them. They're truly similar. Kyona muttered with a smile, tapping her armrest. She stood up and narrowed her eyes. I'll discuss our arrangement later, but don't get too greedy with the price now. If you do, no one would accept the deal. While my services are expensive after all, there aren't many things a queen wants, and what they want are expensive. A shrouded figure shrugged before disappearing with a flutter of raven feathers. Walking around the zone, Atesh walked around the zone to see how other people acted. He was familiar with the actions of people within the city, but that was a rather unique situation. In the city, most people were happy with what they have and enjoy life every day. They would party when a special occasion comes up and laze around on a weekend. Naturally, the same goes for the soldiers since Shiro was able to take care of most of the battles. There wasn't much risk to their health due to her skill, and even if there were risks, Sylvia has that covered. Leaning against the window, Atesh glanced down at the guards that were protecting this zone. Seeing them, he couldn't help but think about how easy it is to break through the first few defenses of this zone. To put it cruelly, they were barely enough to delay time. Cannon fodder, in other words. However, for Acharya, even the weakest cannon fodder was enough to kill several Tier 5 beings on their own due to the weapons and armor Shiro provides. Seeing the military power, Atesh understood how much stronger they were compared to the average queen. But that's only when it comes to the average queen in this new age. The higher level people get, individual strength becomes more important. Without me, Big Sis Ian, Big Sis Lisa, and everyone else, Mum would have a hard time picking fights with other queens/empresses. Atesh thought to himself with a sigh. You seem to be rather disappointed by our soldiers. Mind if I ask about what they're lacking? A feminine voice rang out as Atesh glanced behind him and saw Safi walking up to him with a small smile. Lady Safi. Atesh bowed slightly as Safi shook her head. There's no need to be courteous with me. Just call me Safi like everyone else. She chuckled. That can't do. I am here as an envoy after all. Atesh shook his head. I see. Well, going back to the previous question, if you don't mind me asking, what is it our soldiers are lacking? Seeing your disappointed expression, I can't help but be curious about your thoughts. Hearing this, Atesh paused for a moment before opening his mouth. This might be harsh, but I'll be truthful with you, Lady Safi. If a strong monster was to attack this place, without the Tier SIXS here, the guards will be killed in a matter of moments. Their numbers are impressive, but the individual strengths leave much to be desired. Atesh replied truthfully as Safi glanced out and sighed since that was the truth. With how things were, cultivating good soldiers on top of focusing resources on strong Tier SIXS was difficult. For the average queen, they would naturally pick cultivating Tier SIXS over the soldiers. If she was to be brutally honest, having more soldiers was just a show of manpower. A lackluster attempt to dissuade people from attacking, but that was the case for most queens. However, this is what confused her. The man in front of her, Atesh, made it sound like having a strong army was important. Hence why she wanted to hear his thoughts. Plus, with how strong he felt, having a powerful army should be close to impossible using normal standards. You are not wrong, but is this not the standard? Most of the people used for soldiers are refugees of this garden, those who we extend a helping hand to when the world collapsed before them. There is not much they can do in the city considering the fact that we come from monster origins and need mana rather than food to survive. So we station them as soldiers instead. Safi explained as Atesh nodded his head. It was true that monsters need mana rather than the standard food. The only reason why Ian likes to eat so much was because she enjoyed the taste rather than the mana it provided. Plus, with her skill, it converts anything she eats to mana, so it was efficient for her. Shiro no longer needed to just eat mana crystals because she no longer needed that and can keep herself full with normal food. Plus, with all of her skills, she can survive even without oxygen, much less food. It wouldn't feel great, but she would still survive. I suppose so. Though it is a little sad to see good people being stationed as cannon fodder. Atesh sighed, but that's how it is now. Once a victor is chosen for the new age, all of this can stop. However, let's not talk about victors when we're still in the stages of forming an alliance. How about a spar just to stretch our bodies a little? Safi offered as Atesh thought about it for a moment before nodding. Sure, only one round though. Mother does not like me fighting too much after all. Atesh chuckled. Following Safi to a small arena near the back of the zone, she opened the weapons shed. Do you have a weapon that you prefer? Safi asked as Atesh thought about it for a moment before pointing towards the greatsword. While he was mage-focused, he did like the look of a great sword. Raising her eyebrow, Safi was a little surprised that Atesh wanted the greatsword but passed it to him. However, the moment the greatsword touched Atesh's hand, it burst into flames from the heat of his passive skill. Well, I suppose not using weapons is also fine. Though if you are insistent, I do have a weapon that my mom's subordinate crafted for me. Atesh shrugged. In that case, shall we spar with personal weapons? Safi asked as ice formed in front of her. Grabbing what seems to be the handle, the ice shattered apart to reveal a delicate blade that radiated a sharp aura. Seeing this, Atesh smiled and snapped his finger. A small portal appeared next to him as the handle of a weapon could be seen. Grabbing the handle, Atesh twisted his body and pulled out a runic greatsword. Neon red runes lit up along the blade as the golden cross guard reflected the light of the sun. Asterisk bang, crack, stabbing the sword down. The temperature of the area increased dramatically as light started to distort. That's quite the impressive weapon you have there. Safi praised as she had cold sweat drip down the side of her face. Even with her using ice to cool herself down, the temperature was still unbearable. However, it is just a prototype for now, made from leftover materials that he had within the vault. Once we find a more suitable core material, he'll make me a proper weapon. Atesh narrowed his eyes as he flared his aura. Now, I'll let you have the first move. Atesh offered as Safi smiled. Many thanks. Entering a stance, she dashed forward. A trail of cold energy followed behind her as it was barely holding itself together from the heat. Is this really a queen's personal guard? Atesh thought to himself as the ice was lackluster. Compared to what Shiro could create, this paled in comparison. Even if he was to go all out against Shiro, her ice would just dominate his fire. Plus, ice was no longer her main element. Should she use nanobots, his fire wouldn't even get a chance to perform. Watching Safi charge towards him, Atesh pulled his sword from the ground and activated the first set of runes. Fire erupted out of the blade as a pulse of energy exploded out, evaporating the ice in an instant. Widening her eyes, Safi quickly adjusted her movements and disappeared from his view. I suppose I should hold back a little. If I dominate her too much, it might leave a shadow in her heart and make it harder to get stronger. Atesh thought to himself since he understood that crushing his opponent too much would leave a trauma. Muttering a small chant, runic shackles appeared on his body as it was hidden by the clothes. Twisting his body, he swung his greatsword behind him. Asterisk clang, clashing blades with Safi. He watched as ice appeared in front of his face before exploding into steam. Quickly jumping back, he adjusted his grip on the sword and cleaved down with both hands. Dismissing the mist, he managed to catch the shadow of Safi and knew that she was above him. Removing his right hand from the sword, he slammed it into the ground as a Tier 6 magic circle expanded beneath him. Suddenly, a column of fire exploded into the sky as all of the soldiers were shocked by the heat. Some of their armor started to melt as they quickly removed the plating before they got hurt. Standing up, Atesh stashed his greatsword away. I apologize, it seems like I got a little excited. How about we end the spar for now and find a better occasion next time? Atesh suggested as Safi was surrounded by an ice cocoon that was barely keeping itself together. Let's do that. Safi sighed in resignation since she knew that he was the clear victor. Looking down at her hands, she couldn't help but be amazed by the strength of his flames. Anything below a Tier 6 spell would be melted in an instant, and Tier 6 spells had less than half their power when exposed to his flames. Fighting this man would be suicidal.